So I think it's time to start, Sarah.
Yeah. Shall we begin with our stories?
Yeah, let's do so.
Yeah. So, reflecting on this topic of ours today, staying connected no matter what happens. And it brought up many stories. The more I reflected on it, the more stories that it brought up. But let me begin with one that's within a business context. So I think I mentioned previously, you asked me a question about my own experience, and I brought up an experience with being defamed. And that was one of those situations where I had to make this decision about what would I do with what was happening. So the defamation obviously was very hurtful and very painful. And a number of people who knew me, when there were two sides to the defamation, one was on television. So that was an investigative journalist. And the other one was when a colleague defamed me to my clients. So I actually lost 80% of my business overnight with this defamation. Anyway, so many people came forward encouraging me to take legal action against this person who had done it, but well, both the journalist as well as this person. And I really had to think long and hard about, did I want to do that? And it goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the series about who did I want to be in the presence of all of that. And I realized that who I had to become to pursue defamation was not who I wanted to become. I didn't want to get into that space or that energy. My father was a lawyer, so I had a fairly good idea of what that would ask of me, and I didn't want to. And many people were so upset that I wouldn't do that. But what was interesting was 2 years later, this colleague who had defamed me got caught embezzling from a company, in fact, one of my clients, and they ended up having to call me in to help sort out the mess that had been created. And it was a perfect case of thinking about the long term and thinking about who did I want to be. And I couldn't have had a better resolution, actually, to the whole thing other than to be called upon to clean up a mess. And then my reputation was restored without having to have done any of those things. And so because I'd stayed in connection with people, I'd stayed true to who I was, that seemed to be the thing that kept me in good stead in that situation. And I never went around bad-mouthing or talking about the people who did what they did. I just kept my own counsel and, did what I wanted to focus on and who I wanted to be in that. So that was one. And it was the moment, no matter what happens, was pretty big that I was dealing with. The other story that came to me was actually with one of my sons, who in his teenage years got involved in drugs in a pretty significant way. And he was doing some things that actually was putting his brother at risk. And so I made the decision, very difficult decision, that he needed to leave home, because if he wasn't willing to live by our family values and our code of conduct in home, so if he wasn't willing to stop what he was doing, then I had to stop the exposure to the family. It took me a long time to reach the point that I could actually do it. But I realized that two things. One, if I didn't do it, he wouldn't learn what he needed to learn. And number two, I had to stay connected with him no matter what. So it was yes, you have to leave home unless you're willing to change your behavior. And if you're not, then you're going. And B, I'm your mother. I love you. I care for you deeply. And I will contact you consistently, no matter what, whether you answer my calls, whether you respond to my messages, no matter what, I will stay connected to you as somebody who loves you and cares for you. And that also stood me in good stead, because 6 months later he'd worked it out and then asked me if he could return home, to which I said, you can, but you're now an adult and we now have rules that is your permission to stay. And I'm glad to say that now that he's a fully grown man, he always says that was the best thing I could have ever done. So yeah, staying connected no matter what. Yeah. And Seats, you have a different experience.
Yeah, different story. And staying connected is important because when applying systemic wisdom, we understand that you're always part of something larger than yourself. So if you disconnect, you in a way reject this basic principle. And of course, you're at risk of doing more harm than good if you disconnect. And it's one I really struggle with. I am completely disconnected to what is going on in our country, in the Netherlands, especially the politics. So I don't read any news. I don't understand what's going on. I don't watch any television shows where the politics are being discussed. When my husband is watching, I just leave. I'm going to do something else when he's doing that. So on purpose, I disconnect myself with what is going on in the country I'm living in. And I'm struggling with it. Why am I doing this? What is the price I'm paying? And what are different ways of remaining connected? And when reflecting on this session, I thought, yeah, the reason I'm not connected is because I don't want to be triggered in all my hormones and biochemicals based on parts of information, what we talked about last week, misinformation or manipulated information. So I would rather be out of that, disconnected, than allowing all these things to come into my body. But as said, I'm really struggling with it. So our invitation for you, for the breakout rooms today, is to reflect on, I will put it in the chat, to reflect on what is easy for you to connect with. Of course, it's easy to connect with children, with partners, with friends, with your business. Yes, that's easy to connect with, but maybe not with the whole, maybe just with parts. So the second question is, what are you disconnected with? So we add some more layers in the reflection. And then our third invitation is to explore different ways of connecting to something that's hard for you to connect with. And of course, this is a personal invitation, because I would love to hear after the breakouts what ways you have found to connect when it's difficult to connect. All right, I'm going to open the breakout rooms. You're in groups of 3 or 4, and there's about 15 minutes, so you really have some time to reflect and explore. Enjoy yourselves. All right, so if there's something you'd like to share or want to reflect on, please try to raise your yellow hand. Then I'll call out your name and you can turn on your microphone. If it's too hard, try to catch our attention so we can give you the turn. Is there somebody who'd like to share or to reflect or has a question? Michelle, I see your hand. You need to turn on your microphone. It's still off.
Now it's on.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, okay. What I found really, really nice in our talk is that we talked about disconnecting, but still the connection, a bit like Sarah was saying, that so you disconnect. So I had this example of on my workspace, I have 2 people who I start disconnecting with because of their hang into the history of the company, not wanting to go forward. And for the change we have to make, I feel that I'm disconnecting to them. And as while we were talking, I said, but on the other hand, on a human level, I still feel connected with them. I see them as a human being, and they are warm personalities. It's just that I don't think that they fit the system anymore, and that's why I'm disconnecting. And we were talking like, okay, but maybe the disconnecting, I find it scary because on the other hand, there's two key persons in the team. What happens if they leave? But on the other hand, I feel like, oh, but then maybe other possibilities arrive. So the disconnecting on the personal, on the professional level, but still staying connected on the personal, on the human being level. That was a bit what we talked about.
Thank you, Michelle. Yeah, very interesting to hear. And yes, if you're not able to disconnect, you, in a way, imprison yourself. If there's no room for movement, there's stuckness by default. Yeah.
Yes, so we were, yeah, it was beautiful because Janneke also had a very nice, maybe you want to share, Janneke? It was such a lovely example that you gave us.
Sure, I want to share. I'm helping a homeless family at the moment. I met them the other week and I'm trying to help them. And in the same way, being in my own space, sort of, they're reaching out. I want to help them. I can help them on different levels. But on another level, I have to really set my boundaries. So this is what I can do and this is what I can't do. And it's sort of a dance because they really, really need help. And of course, I cannot solve the problem. Not all the problems I can help, but it's sort of this setting boundaries and stay connected with them, but also stay connected with me and my boundaries.
I think there's something about how do you create space for your needs without rejecting the other. You know, so you're not rejecting them or alienating from them, because I think that's when the damage happens, when we other, you know, we turn them into the other and we depersonalize. So how do we stay in relationship, in the space for ourselves, and then we can have the kind of connection, whether it's close or distant, that can be nourishing for them and good stewardship of ourselves at the same time. Yeah.
Yes, beautifully said. Thank you.
So thank you for sharing this with us. It's 8:30 here. I think it's 4:30 with you, Sarah.
Yes.
So it's time to close this session. Thank you all for being present here. Next week, our topic will be recognizing health following the flow of life. So if you're only disconnected, there's no health, there's no flow of life. So we'll explore that next week. Recognizing health, is it healthy? How do we stay connected to the flow of life? I wish you a wonderful week. Thank you for attending and hope to see you next week.
See you.
Bye.
You too. Thank you wel.
Dag.
Bye-bye. Have a nice
Dag,
day.
dank je.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Doei allemaal.
Doeg.